Yeah, well, I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Can
Can
We
we
Talk?
talk?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the. I had to call in a favor from our dear friend Tevin Campbell. If we, if he
Wow,
could
he came out
read,
of hiding just for you.
yeah, to record. A lot of people are really excited to see that. But I think he visited South Africa a number of years ago and did a performance with some of their bands, and so but a lot of people hadn't seen him since he was a kid and then
Yeah.
performing the song. So, but anyway, it was good that we were able to use that as a way of promoting the show.
Yeah, it's always good to see Tevin. I really miss him. I wish he would, throw his hat back in the ring and do some more music. Like we want to hear it. I think that enough time's passed,
Yeah.
and we want to hear where he is in his life now and what he has to say. So I'm hoping he has something new for us.
Well, in the second half of the show, we'll probably talk about him and some other artists and where are they now and stuff like that. But what were we going to start off with today?
Well, I believe we'll do a top five list of our favorite female groups.
Okay, okay.
Yes,
You know what? In the 90s, there were just so many
so
different
many.
ones. And when I thought about that, I thought, you know what? My criteria was I wanted them to have at least two albums because there was some of them
Yeah.
that had one album and maybe they recorded other ones, but didn't really make the impact like their debut album. So
Hmm.
I know in the past you've always started. So is it okay if I start or do you want to continue starting?
Oh, you could start definitely.
Okay, okay. Um, well, looked and I thought, okay, my number five would be Brownstone.
Okay, great.
Yes, they had at least two albums. Their first album was really groundbreaking. Now, and I don't know if this was because I was a Michael Jackson fan and I was excited to see he had his own label and his group. But one of the things I could say about Brownstone, especially with Nicole Gilbert's powerful vocals, and they had Dave Jam Hall, who was part of the Untouchables, doing a number of their production on their first album. You know,
Right.
Grapevine, Do You Love Me, um, I Still Love You. It was just a different type of song album compared to what was out there at the time. So Brownstone, they really made a good impact, and as I said, it was almost like R&B, but a little bit of neo soul. So they were bridging the gap. The first album went platinum. The second album didn't have the right promotion to do
Right.
as good, but it was still a very
It
good
was
album.
good.
Yeah.
Yes. For me, I put at number five. This was one I had two kind of wedged into one, but I'm not going to mention the other one. I'm gonna final answer. I'm gonna put Destiny's Child. Now I know Destiny's Child will be at the top of a lot of people's list,
At top of a lot
but
of people's list.
yes, I want to give shine to other groups as well. I think that for me, I love Destiny's Child, but I wasn't. There's a lot of different criteria to how I pick my albums and
Okay.
um, cohesiveness, consistency, vocals, etc. Those round out a lot of what I take into consideration. Just like in general, when we talk about, and real quick, in general, when we talk about female vocal or groups, I'm focusing on groups that, when I think of a group, I think of a group that sings together, that harmonizes together.
Yeah.
Um, Things of that nature. So that would kind of eliminate some groups that were popular, but we're gonna get on it. With Destiny's Child, I wasn't a big fan of the first album, but I did like the singles. I did like No 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 No. That was like my favorite song in '99, one of my favorite
Mm,
songs. And just the introduction of the group and Beyonce specifically, because she did stand out from the get-go.
yeah.
They look like stars, and um everything, the imagery to the cohesion as the visuals.
Yeah.
um they had other songs on that first album that I liked too, but that was the strongest one. And then the second album is by far their best album, The Writings on the Wall,
Yeah.
which really kind of ignited the group thing briefly in the
Yeah.
early 2000s. for the R&B acts,
Mm,
because at that time a lot of R&B groups were breaking up,
yeah,
like 702 and Total, etc. So
yeah.
that album meant a lot to me. The production was crazy. Kevin Shakespeare
Okay, yeah,
Briggs, he
yeah.
and Candy did a lot of their hit singles on the Writing on the Wall album. And then they came back with Survivor. I wasn't a big fan of that, but there were a lot of songs on there that I liked too.
Mm.
But just the group dynamic, what they've been able to contribute to the genre, definitely I have to put them at number 5.
The thing about Destiny's Child, there seems to be, I don't know if it's Beyonce that people don't seem to like from a generations, because when on halftime chat, when we do polls and Destiny's Child are there, they tend to score very low. And I don't know if there is there are a few people that still do say, yeah, we like Destiny's Child, but majority seem to be an anti-Destiny's Child. And I don't know if this is any backlash against Beyonce,
It's a backlash.
against Beyonce. So
I
that's
believe it's a backlash. Yeah,
okay.
when you're always constantly winning, there will be people that are kind of tired of you. And I think that's what it is Beyonce's been so successful and she's pretty much achieved everything. And we've heard her voice so many times, and you
Yeah,
just kind of get a little tired of it. And I think that unfortunately it seems, I think also it's the culture in general, because all of the other achievements of other artists have been drowned out. All the other girl groups or all the other female artists have been drowned out
yeah,
in favor of Beyonce. So then that creates a backlash, So, but she deserves everything. She is to me the best female entertainer ever ever existed. I think that she surpasses every female entertainer and most male entertainers. She's just a genuine workhorse when it comes to the stage and the
yeah,
show. But I'll give her credit, but
yeah.
we can't deny it.
And yeah, and I won't. The one thing I won't deny is that as an entertainer, performer, vocalist, that she's not A plus. I think there's the issue that a lot of us might have is that the um, the mainstream media has embraced her as the ultimate, and
Right,
she could put out a very average album or song and she would win the Grammys.
right.
So
That's
she's
true.
now the most successful female artist with in Grammy history. Then you start thinking about people like Anita Baker, Patti LaBelle, Aretha Franklin. The fact that someone like um, uh, um, um, Tina Turner has never won a Grammy. You start thinking about these legendary female artists from the past have won one or two or hardly any, and yet they've given Beyonce up to 25. And I think that's where the backlash from this, like, wait a minute, I mean, she's good as a performer and stuff, but she had an album that was premiered on Disney, some Black is King or something like that. Um,
Hmm.
you know, mediocre album and stuff and visual performance, but that it won two
Right.
Grammys, and it was almost like, yeah, it's Queen Bee. We're going to just give you some Grammys, and I think that's where we're like, oh well. I mean, we celebrate it, but you guys have pushed it to a point where you've, and so I think that's stuff to talk about anyway. Not distracting
Right.
from from our list and stuff.
Yeah, there's so much you could talk about in that
Yeah,
subject.
and we'll bring it up. My number four, and I thought hard about this, changing faces. Now, and it wasn't because I interviewed Cassandra Lucas,
Cassandra, yeah.
but they were different. There were a few girl duels. Two people groups. Zane,
Hmm.
um, Tina, Terry, and Monica. There was a few, but they um, came out with I think three albums, and they came out with three albums, but all three came out with hits. They had a
Right.
formula where, okay, we used R. Kelly to do two tracks. They wrote the majority of the rest of the album, but it was consistent. You knew what you were getting. It was different the way they managed to harmonize and hold their own. And really, as I said, it took a while to get used to just seeing two girls and not the group. But I just loved their consistency and
Right.
their uniqueness, not trying to be like anyone else. What about yourself?
My thoughts on it. I like Changing Faces. I've never been a fan of their albums.
Okay.
I've been a fan of their singles. I think that the best by far is that has worked with them is R. Kelly. I think he understands what they need
Yeah.
vocally and material wise, and I think that he is actually what made them work. Because, like I said, the first album, I will say I did like the first album. The second album, I wasn't a fan. It was a lot of things that I didn't care for on the album, but I like their sound. I like them, the idea of Changing Faces. It's interesting because I wanted to put some duos on the list, but I was hoping that we could do a separate list for duos. But
Okay.
um, of that time, there were two duos. There were Changing Faces and Janae, and I just personally like Janae better.
Okay.
Um, and that's who's gonna be my number four.
Okay.
Because I have someone there, but I kind of want to change that for Janae because I think that I really wanted to highlight them. And their first album and their second album were awesome. They were very heavily involved in the writing and production of those albums.
Mm,
And I think, and I spoke about this previously about another artist named Tweet. Their first single was misleading to people. Like it was like a club, it was like a hip hop club dance kind
yeah.
of record with
Hey,
Hey
Mr.
Mr.
DJ.
DJ.
Yeah.
And so everybody thought, oh, this must be an up-tempo record. And I remember I was really young when I got the album. I was expecting it to be like real upbeat and fun. And it was very jazzy and moody. And this was around the time I was listening to Mary and Her My Life. And that was another album that was that kind of connected with me. But they had some really beautiful songs on there, Sending You My Love,
Yeah.
which was just a lovely song and video. Groove Thing, which was another fun record.
Yeah.
But then the second album got a little deeper in their jazz roots, and they covered For the Last Time, Billy Joel. Um, their first single, Request Line, was pretty good off of the second album. The second album was really nice, and it was highly overlooked due to poor promotion. And then the group eventually broke up. But for me, that was my number four, Janae.
Yeah. Okay. I have reached out to Renee, but she's not. Her team has said she's not doing interviews right now, but I'll still keep them
Oh,
in the loop.
that would be a good interview. Okay.
So my third, SWV.
Oh, okay.
Um, the strangest thing is that I remember when they first came out, and you know that's I'm so into you and right here right now. They're very much because when people think about the 90s, we remember the probably from that 92, 93. That was where the sound was much different. You know, 92, 93 was much different from the late 80s. So we think about New
Hmm.
Jack Swing, what Teddy was bringing in the 80s to about 91, 92. And then the sound changed, and people like Jade, Don't Walk Away, and SWV, Moke and Steph. So there were very distinct sounds and very different groups. So, you know, I was really big into love the SWV, especially when I knew Teddy
Mm.
did the remix of of
Right.
I'm So Into
Right
You.
here.
I bought the single. No, I'm So Into You. He did the without the Rex Effects rapping.
Oh.
I bought
Oh
the
yeah, you're
maxi
right. You're right.
single,
You're right. I missed
and
that. Yeah.
yeah, and then the Right Here Human Nature
Right.
remix as well. Then, strangely enough, I didn't buy about It's About Time the album, but I did get Above
I
the
didn't
Rim.
either though.
I did buy the Above the Ring soundtrack because when they were on that, and I did get the other albums subsequently
Right.
and
Right.
release some tension. Um, I think what did change a little bit was the fact that they didn't have a cohesive sound like they did in their first album because Brian did about
Right.
8 songs, so it felt like he knew their voice. Having Puffy doing had Puffy, had Mary, had stuff with Little C, so it was singles, but not it
Yeah.
wasn't an album. But you
It
can't
felt like
deny
a album of a collection of
a
singles. That third
collection of
album.
singles. Yeah,
It didn't
yeah.
feel like a cohesive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't. But as I said, you can't deny their harmonies and the Coco's amazing voice and how
Right.
the others complemented. So SWV my number three.
And you know what? We both have the same number 3. SWV was
Okay.
my number 3 as well, and for the same reasons. And um, SWV was one of the first groups that, for me, spoke to me because it had that street edge, and it was just they were another group that were cool that came out around the same time Mary J. Blige came out with that hip hop attitude, and that was the first time
Yeah.
we saw females kind of have a rougher side to them, a kind of
Mm,
street angle, and their vocals. Coco had a very unique. I've never heard a voice like that, and I think that's
mm,
what really grabbed me. And then coupled with Brian Alexander Morgan's production and the way he produced those background vocals,
mm.
um, was the hook for me. It was very unique and different, and I couldn't get enough of "I'm So Into You." I could not get enough. I used to listen to that song over and over again. And the second, all the singles off that album I love, but like you said, I for some reason I didn't buy the album. And then the second album came, and I bought the second album, and it wasn't the same as the first, but it was still good. It was still a good
Yeah.
album. But SWV, I think a lot has been borrowed from them as well for today's culture. Um, I think that they don't get enough credit. I think they are a little underrated.
Yeah.
So they're my number 3.
Number 3. So with number 2, um, a group that really I just was amazing was Total. And
Oh, okay.
strange, I've interviewed 2/3 of them, but I'm still waiting for Keisha to come on board. But from their first out single, Pam has this amazing, distinctive voice, like a little girl crying when she's trying to sing.
Right.
Um, you know, then you had Keisha, how she performs to the camera, and then you had Kima, who was almost like, okay, mysterious in how she was performing. But
Hmm.
they really defined this. They really took the bad boy, the beats to the hitmen. Those beats from Can't You See, No One Else. It was like, it was almost as if Puffy was experimenting with his sound with his producers, and they were able to deliver on them. So if you think about the song they had with the Brat, um,
No
No
one
One
else.
Else,
Yeah.
just even the remix version of that, it was almost like, wow, it's just really, really straight up hip hop sort of beats, and but they could sing as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, Total, and they had two really good albums, but Pam explained why they didn't do a third, just because she got caught up in the industry, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, Total are my
Yeah.
number 2.
Yeah, I really like Toto. Unfortunately, they didn't make my list, but
Okay.
they were definitely a strong unit. I think the first thing I think about with Toto is attitude and edgy, and
Mm.
I think that Pam definitely added an edgy element to the group. Keisha added a sexy
Yeah.
element. Kima was very mysterious and
Yeah.
girl next door kind of thing. So I really liked their vibe, and the vocals their harmonies were really really interesting. So I really loved the second album as well. Like
Okay. Yeah.
the one that Missy had a big hand in. Missy
Yeah.
Elliott produced, I think, half of that album. And unfortunately, they didn't get a chance to release any other songs after sitting at home. But it was a really good album. But anyway, let me get to where are we? Number 3 or number 2?
Number 2. You're number 2.
Oh, my number 2. Okay. So, so number 2 goes to a group that I never really hear people bringing up, but they were at the time when they first came out, they were really, to me, on the same level as some of the top girl groups at the time. Jade. Jade definitely is probably one of my favorite girl groups. Vocally, individually, they all can sing, they all can share leads. Collectively, their vocals, their harmonies rival in Vogue, and they're only a trio. And that first album was really, to me, it had a lot of hits on it. The second album was really a growth in uh, vocals and material, material. Songs like "Every Day of the Week," "Don't Walk Away, Boy," um, you know, I really wish they had a longer uh, run, because
Mm,
I felt like they were stealing a lot of shine from the other groups at the
yeah,
time that they came out. And if anybody's ever seen their live special that came on BT, you know what I'm talking about. Like, those girls could sing.
mm,
And you know, they did a remix with the Emotion song. I believe it was called "Don't Ask My Neighbor," and it was just so lovely. And Bless It. So, you know, I hate when I see really talented people not see their full potential, because
mm,
I felt like they could have been at the same level as the In Vogues and the SWVs. But unfortunately, like I said, due to, you know, the same old story, bad, you know, record contracts and things
yeah,
of that nature. And I think they were also put together as a group. They weren't
yeah.
they were, you know, they were put together, so they weren't friends necessarily.
Mm.
So those things kind of led to their demise. But I would love for them to come back. I would love for them to try to do it again. But they're definitely number two for me, you know?
Okay. Yeah, and you know, no one can ever deny that when if Don't Walk Away comes on, that's the signature 90s song. You know, if you
Right.
had, you know, in fact, you know, in a later show we'll do our top five 90s songs, male, female, and Don't Walk Away will have to be there because it's one of the 90s anthems. My top group would have to go to In Vogue. Their Born to
Okay.
Sing debut album, it was something mesmerizing, you know, because we hadn't seen that type of harmony, because that was very common, say, in the 50s, 60s. That, well, actually, I think the 50s, the way they came out with that three, four-part harmony, you know, but you know, I can still see the CD, you know, see the CD with the four of them sitting, just sitting, lying down in their white, looking out.
Hmm.
It was a powerful album, the debut album. I wasn't too much of a big fan when they came out with their second album with Free Your Mind. I thought it was a little too rocky. I'm not a big fan of that type of guitar riff
Right.
for R&B, but they did have other big songs on that, Lies and other things on their second album. Then, you know, they came out with the sort of the F mob when they had, What a Man and Don't Go. Oh,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, so that's,
Runaway. Wait.
Runaway
Runaway.
Love.
Runaway
Sorry,
Love.
Runaway Love.
Oh,
Runaway
okay.
Love. Yeah, Runaway
Yeah.
Love. I said Don't Go. Yeah, Runaway Love. And like everyone else, when they sang the lead for the Set It Off soundtrack with their biggest single, um, you know, Don't Go, and you know, Dawn's Bells in the Towers, it was a crossover because I was living in Redondo Beach. I was living in, you know, and so it was massive in the community. You know, so if you ever been to Los Angeles and know Redondo Beach, it's 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 a very Caucasian environment, but
Right.
they loved that track, and it was a massive hit.
I was.
But the fact
Hmm.
that Dawn leaves just as EV3 comes out, I couldn't, even though she has her vocals still on the album, I just, with one of their most powerful singers gone, I just couldn't. I didn't even buy the album. I just thought, no, you
Mm.
just don't do that. And I think that was it. As good as the album was, and even Masterpiece Fit, I think the fact that we were such a powerful harmony group like that, that was a disappointment. But as I said, I have to give them the props. They were the you know, pioneer R&B female groups of the 90s.
Yeah. They definitely were reestablishing that dynamic. Um, So I want to go through some honorable mentions. I know
Okay.
people are kind of in suspense, like, what was your number four? So my number four was Brownstone, but you said Brownstone. So I was like,
Okay.
well, let me throw something else in, because I was kind of going back and forth with a few names. But Brownstone definitely is somebody that, just their way, their harmonies, they had that church feel for their harmonies. That's an
Mm,
honorable mention. TLC, now again, my criteria is groups that harmonize together. When I think of singing groups, I think of groups that actually sing and harmonize, and TLC doesn't do that. If you read the liner notes and the credits, Deborah Killings were responsible for a lot of their background vocals.
wow.
So they don't necessarily classify in my terms as an R&B singing group. So I'm going to give you my number one, which we both had the same number one, In Vogue. In Vogue. You know, In Vogue is the full package. I think that when they hit, I think they kind of redefined the girl group, because there were girl groups in the early 90s, like the Good Girls, and I mean, you know, there were a lot of other girl groups, but
Good Girls. What was it? The one on Capitol. Can't remember their names
the
now.
girls, basically.
The
You talking about
girls,
the one that was on Uptown?
Yeah, the girls.
And you know, they had Seduction, they had Expose, different groups out, but it's something about there were so many shades of the old school, you know, girl groups in Vogue, and the future of what girl groups would be. And they had this almost model-esque kind of presence in their pictures and their imagery. It was just so well put together. The production was great by Thomas and Elroy, and you know, so F Mob, whatever they want to be called. But so their first album definitely grabbed me. Hold On, Lies, a lot of beautiful ballads. The second album, I liked the second album. It was a lot of interesting things on it, but there was a couple of things, like you said, I know it was a little too rocky, poppy kind of things. But right, and my heart was broken when Dawn left. And before the third album. But I was so excited when What's It Gonna Be, Don't Let Go, that came out. I remember there was like this long break between the second album and the third album, and I kept thinking, where is In Vogue? Where's In Vogue? And then Terry put out her album, and I couldn't get with it. You know, it's just too slow. I was like, this is not what I want. I like Terry, but I just didn't. That's not what I want. I want In Vogue. And then when they finally came out with that video for the Set It Off soundtrack, I was so excited. So after the video and the momentum of that, and then Dawn left, I was so heartbroken. I was like, what is going on? And I blamed her. I'm like, Dawn, what are you doing? But I'm glad we got the full story, and I'm glad you got a chance to interview her, and you guys can go check that interview out. But yeah, that's my top. That's my five. Not really in order, but In Vogue for me is going to be number one, regardless. I just think that they set a standard that all of the other girls, like Escape and all these other girls, kind of wanted to do, you know, or want to reach, I should say.
And I did think about TLC, and they were different, but I actually preferred their first album to any of the other albums they came out with. And
it was more fun.
Cut Close, if they had more than one album, I probably would have put them. I love their first album, but I just, you know, that I didn't like. And then Escape, I never bought an album from Escape. I listened to the singles, but I never bought their album, so that's why I didn't put them.
It's funny, Escape, you know, I like Escape, I do. I'm not a fan of their full-length albums. And because I know people like, you didn't say Escape. I love like the singles, like Who Can I Run To? You know, I like Just Kicking, Understanding. But for me, whenever I make a list, it's more so about how did the album make me feel? What's the total package? Like there are artists that I love them, but I haven't bought an album. You know, or I haven't heard the whole album, or I just don't care for. Like I've said this before. I really like Mariah Carey. I admire her. I think she's very talented. I've just never been a fan of her full-length albums. You know, Janet Jackson. I like Janet Jackson, but I've never been a fan of the full-length album. And so for me, I'll pop the CD in and listen to maybe 6 or 7 songs, take it out. And I'm thinking about these people I listed, like Brownstone, SWV, Jade, Janae. So those are groups that I could put their albums in and just listen to it. I don't have to stop, you know. So that's what I make my criteria about.